Well, earlier I spoke with Dr. Ben Carson, who is truly an American success story. From a humble beginning in public housing and failing in school, he became a world-renowned neurosurgeon, authored 9 books, now serves as the 17th Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. He says cities are facing real challenges as unrest sweeps through the country, but the solutions are woven into the fabric of America. Please welcome Dr. Ben Carson. Mr. Secretary, one of the big challenges that you have and that the country has is dealing with the crisis of the inner cities, which we've really seen lately. Let's talk about some real solutions that you feel like we need to be looking at, implementing, not just from a housing standpoint, but from a broader community standpoint.
Well, you know, one of the things that this coronavirus outbreak has taught us is that there are certain people in our society who are extremely susceptible. And, you know, the mortality rates in the African-American community and Hispanic community are very, very high. And it's largely because of the comorbidities. And you have to ask yourself, should we direct attention to the hypertension and the diabetes and the obesity and the asthma and all these things? Of course we should. But if we're going to be serious about solving the problem, we have to go to the next level down and ask, why are those things occurring? And that means we have to deal with things like the housing situation, affordable and fair housing. It means we have to deal with long-term medical care, not just acute going into the neighborhood and doing blood pressures on people, but long-term follow-up to the right kind of outcome. It means we have to deal with food deserts, we have to deal with healthy foods, transportation, and most importantly, education.
Mr. Secretary, I read your book. I know that you were a young man who grew up in the inner city, didn't grow up with affluence and wealth, grew up with poverty, but a hardworking mother. But you were a very angry young man at one time in your life and not doing that well in school. Yet instead of throwing bricks through windows and looting stores, you ended up becoming one of the most, if not the most, renowned pediatric neurosurgeons in the history of the world. What moved you from being a brick-throwing looter to a neurosurgeon and now the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development?
Well, to be brutally honest, it was God. You know, I had a horrible temper. And when I would get angry, it really didn't matter what the consequences were. I was just mad. I just wanted to react. I wanted to hit somebody with a baseball bat or throw a brick and forget about the consequences. And so I do understand how people feel sometimes, but I had an epiphany one day after I tried to stab someone and I was in the bathroom, and I picked up a Bible and I started reading all these verses in the book of Proverbs about anger. And they all seemed like they were written about me. But I came to an understanding that the reason that I was always angry is because I was selfish. Everything was about me and how I felt and how somebody had gotten to my space, and it was me, my, and I. And the Lord helped me to see that if you just step outside of the center of the circle and let it be about somebody else, you won't be angry. That was the last day that I had an angry outburst. And it really does work. And, you know, people have to be able to think about something other than themselves. You know, those people who are rioting in Minnesota and destroying the life work sometimes of people who had their little shop and their little business. How about thinking about those people? And, you know, if we begin to think about that, and the people who are trying to destroy the statues and portraits and all of these kinds of things, think about the good things. There is nobody who's perfect. There's nobody who has a perfect history. But we do have a lot of incredible people who contributed to the success of this country that nobody knows about. How about let's talk about them? Maybe let's put some monuments up to them. And, you know, some of those people are African American. You know, you take somebody like Lewis Latimer, who is Thomas Edison's right-hand man. He was the one who came up with the filament that made the light bulb work for more than 2 or 3 days. He invented the electric lamp. He diagrammed the telephone for Alexander Graham Bell. Almost nobody knows about him, or talk about a statue to Elijah McCoy, who was a great engineer and engineered the automatic lubrication system for locomotive engines. He had so many inventions, but people were always trying to copy his inventions. And it got to the point where people say, is that a McCoy? Is that the real McCoy? Most people don't even know that that was an African-American.
Yeah.
You know, so why don't you put those statues up rather than trying to pull other ones down and celebrate the incredible history that we have together?
That is a phenomenal idea. I hope somebody is listening and will follow up on it, because I think that's exactly the kind of thing we need to be doing. But you have affirmed that the real challenge in this country is not political or racial, it's spiritual. And I think it's powerful that you mentioned that, because so many people are afraid to say what you just said. You have been outspoken, and you've talked very openly in interviews about the need for law and order. Explain why that is important to you, and why it doesn't matter what color our skin is, law and order matters to all of us.
Well, if you're going to have a civil society and a society in which people are willing to work hard and to build things, you obviously need a mechanism to protect those things. And that's what we have. That's one of the things that distinguished our society and helped it to flourish so much, because we were a society of law and order. That's what your taxes pay for. And when mayors and governors and city councils refuse to protect the people and to protect their property, they're actually breaking a contract with the people. And it is appropriate for the people to seek redress from them, quite frankly.
One final thought, and I want you to address something you started, an initiative called Foster to Youth Independence. Tell us about that and how that is helping a lot of young kids who may have been once like you to finding a new direction for life.
Yeah, the Foster Youth Independence Program is a real incredible story. There were a number of young people who came to us here at HUD a little over a year ago who were about to age out of foster care. About 20,000 young people age out of foster care each year. And within the next 4 years, approximately a quarter of them become homeless. And to the credit of the amazing staff we have here at HUD, they put together this program and gave out the first grants within 4 months. So people who tell you the government can't work quickly, listen to that story. But it provides vouchers, tenant protection vouchers, giving them the ability to have their own apartment, their own place. And not only that, but also provides the wraparound services that they need. In some cases, you know, they have not graduated from high school, so we will help them to get their GED. Some cases it might be a higher degree than that. It may be some type of training. It may be, you know, financial literacy. Whatever they need is provided in order to set them on a trajectory for self-sufficiency.
I think what you've just described is a very good reason for which I am so grateful President Trump appointed you to be Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Ben Carson, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you. You can follow Ben Carson on social media at Secretary Carson, and visit HUD.gov to discover the good work that Secretary Carson's office is doing to create affordable housing for all Americans.